Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Bases Loaded right here on OTF. I'm your host, Blake Munroe, where I'm joined by Jeff Howe and CJ Vogel each and every week. And, guys, we're just going to jump right into it. It's another one of those weekends where we get to actually talk about game one of the series already happening. And we'll get to that here in a little bit. But I want to rewind because there was a really big series that took place since we've last spoken. And, of course, that was against A&M. Very close games around the board. So let's start there before we get into Prairie View for a moment. But, I mean, all in all, a sweep of the Aggies. I don't think any Texas fan can complain.
No, certainly not. Not especially coming into this year with the stakes of A&M coming in as the preseason one, Texas now being ranked one, the whole Jim Schlossnagle move from College Station to Austin. I don't think it could have gone any better if you're a Texas fan, right? 3 one-run games. Not an easy thing to do, especially with an A&M team that was averaging north of 11 runs per game over their last 11 games. So that was a team that was peaking. It felt like, of course, came to Austin, and with no Jared Spencer, you kind of wondered how the Texas Arms would stack up. Well, they did just fine, it looked like, and that's a heck of a win, and really cemented the Longhorns as the number one team in the country.
Yeah, I especially like the Saturday and Sunday wins because you look at Saturday. A&M had the tying run on third base, I think, with one out in the ninth, and for Texas to shut the door. It's just a great way to end it. And then, that Sunday game, A&M comes out, and it looks like, hey, they really want it. They don't want to get swept. They really want to get one. And it looked kind of like maybe how we saw the Thursday game against Arkansas unfold, where it's like, hey, maybe it's just not your day, and, tip your cap to the opponent. But, man, credit Texas. They just found a way to come back and win and to get that sweep. It was a chef's kiss, but I think that bled into the current week a little bit. You can't play that kind of series with 3 emotionally charged games where you really do feel like you just came out of like a super regional or regional tournament and then go on the road on a short week and play Arkansas, especially when Arkansas got rained out on Tuesday. Part of me wonders if Texas would have been better. I know people have their feelings about this, but guys, part of me wonders if Texas would have been better off just buying out that Prairie View game and, not playing it. But, hey, hindsight is 20/20. But, hey, great sweep, great winning streak. But hopefully they just flush Thursday and move on.
And, Jeff, we talked last Friday, we talked about there were so many storylines surrounding that game that you could go with. But I'm curious to y'all, what was the main storyline, or maybe, what grabbed your attention the most that we learned about Texas from that series?
Ooh, from that series last week, I mean, the back end of the bullpen, right? Dylan Valantis, you talk about Max Rubs, you talk about the arms. We've seen that all year. But, look, I have to tip my cap to a Tommy Farmer. Some of those guys in the back end of the lineup, some big-time clutch hitting, especially in that 2-1 game where it felt like there really wasn't anything going on in either dugout in terms of getting the sticks hot, and to find the first home run of the season there in the bottom of the 7th, I believe. Clutch hitting after clutch hitting, it's come up, and this is about 2 weeks in a row now where we've said the bottom of the order has really risen to the occasion, whether it be a Jonah Williams, whether it be a Casey Borba, a Tommy Farmer, guys in the back end. Duplantier had a big hit, right? So it's all about the timely hitting, and right now that's something that I think Texas is certainly getting valuable experience for whenever regionals and supers come rolling around.
I think, to me, it's just the fact that they've kept finding ways to win, even as the injuries have mounted. First it was how do you manage without Max Blue? Then it's how do you figure out, with Ethan Mendoza limited to the DH role, how do you work around that? Now it's Jared Spencer. So of all the injuries they've had, they figured out a way how to win baseball games and how to make it work. I love the fact that, CJ, you alluded to this a little bit too, kind of guys that you haven't really expected much from. It's Tommy Farmer coming up with some big hits. Adrian Rodriguez had the walk-off. It's good to see him starting to get back to form. So we've seen Casey Borba, he's been up and down, but when he's been up, it's been way, way up. So the guys at the bottom of the order and guys that, hey, if you can get something from this guy, you kind of feel like, it's found money. I like what you're getting from some of those guys at the bottom of the lineup.
And then Prairie View A&M, of course, Texas faced them on Tuesday. As you can see on the screen there, 11-2 was the win for that one. But, guys, I'm actually going to bring this up because I thought this was kind of big. Easton Winfield, he transfers into Texas. hasn't really made the impact that a lot of people have thought that he would. But he had a good game on Tuesday. 4 hits, a home run, 2 RBIs. I mean, obviously his biggest game of the year, and hopefully a confidence booster for Winfield going forward.
Man, would that be big, right? And it's not been the season I think Easton expected coming into the season, right? He was a guy that was pegged to be a starting left fielder for Texas. And, I know it's Prairie View A&M, but anytime you can just feel the consistency of a barrel after barrel in a game, it goes a long way. So what does this mean moving forward? We'll have to wait and see. Of course, it was Jonah Williams in left field for game 1 in Fayetteville. Will that be the case moving forward? We'll have to wait and see, Blake. But right now, when it comes to finding guys that you can rely on deep in the season, hopefully that sparks something for Winfield to become a guy Texas can throw out there later on this year.
Galvan, Schussler, Ballou, Flores, you're most likely going to be without all 4 of those guys in 2026. So Winfield, to me, it's not so much about getting him confidence for this year in case you need him in the postseason. It's about, can you get him confident to where he can get through this season, get through the summer, get the fall, and you feel like you've got him back on track to where you've got a guy you can depend on, hopefully at the top of your lineup next season.
Mm-hmm.
Well, before we move on, I need to thank one of our sponsors today, and that's Chinook Seedery. Whether you're watching the game on the couch or you're in the stands, be sure to grab you a bag of Chinook. They offer 8 amazing flavors that you're going to love. I told y'all all season long, my favorite is lemon pepper, but all of them are outstanding. So find you one in a store or go online at chinookseedery.com and be sure to check that out. So we want to thank them for sponsoring each and every week right here on Bases Loaded. All right, well, Arkansas and Texas started squaring off yesterday, fellas. Didn't go the way that we would all hope. Arkansas wins this one 9-0. And I'll be the first to admit I was on the road for a lot of this game, so I didn't get a chance to catch it all. But I'm curious to get y'all's thoughts.
You didn't miss much, Blake, with all due respect.
Nothing you want to go back and watch.
Yeah, it's kind of like speaking of Arkansas, it's kind of like when I was traveling going to the Under Armour game when Texas played Arkansas in the Texas Bowl. That year, the Charlie Strong year, Charlie's one year they went to a bowl. I fell asleep and missed most of the game in my hotel room and was told that don't worry about going back and watching it. You don't want to watch it. It's just if you're a masochist, you might. But other than that, it serves no purpose. Now, my big thing was, strikeout numbers were really high. 14 strikeouts by Arkansas pitching, so you never want to see that. You never want to see 2 hits. The big thing that's concerning for me, 2 things coming out of this. One, you hope with Ruger Riojas, like it was just a bad night. And, you hope he's not, tipping pitches or anything like that. You hope it's not something that you've got to worry about. So hopefully just chalk it up to a bad night because you're going to need that guy. And we talk about the lineup. I'm officially, when you're hitting below the Mendoza line at this point in conference play, it's officially time to push the panic button. You guys realize Jalen Flores is only hitting 189 after Thursday night's game in SEC play. So you're not going to get to where you want to be with Jalen Flores hitting, below his weight. So I don't know if it's a mechanical thing, if it's a confidence thing, if he's not seeing the ball. But even like a Casey Borba, you can tell, even though Borba's still struggling, you can tell, okay, he's at least seeing the ball because when he makes contact, it's good contact, and he's been able to drive it a little bit. Flores has really been scuffling. So getting him right is massive over these last 8 conference games they've got before the SEC tournament.
Yeah, I guess I did not know that. Or at least hadn't recognized it because it felt like of those hits, the rare hits that he gets, I guess, all of them have major implications on the outcome of the game. I've always said this season, it feels like you need a clutch hit. He's the guy that's in that situation. Obviously, his base running against Texas A&M was a big reason for that Texas win on Saturday last week. But I'm with you. If you didn't watch this game, certainly don't go watch the highlights. For Ruger Riojas specifically, it's all about getting the breaking balls down in the zone. He left a lot hanging, and he got punished, right? And it's not that it's surprising that a game like this happened. It's more surprising that it took this long for a game like this to happen to Texas. And the SEC, you kind of expect 1 or 2 times throughout the season just kind of get smacked around. Like Texas has done this to several teams, right? Already this season. So I guess, for it to be May 1st and we're talking about the first real, whoa, that was ugly game. That's okay. And hey, there's things to learn from losses, hopefully, for Ruger Riojas and, the rest of this lineup. You can kind of shelf this, learn from going on the road, playing the hog pen and coming back and moving forward.
Yeah. Best thing though, guys, like I said earlier, just, man, chalk that one up to you were due for one of these and just move on, flush it. And hopefully the last two games of the series, we see a different Texas team than the one we saw Thursday.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I do think the one bright spot, and CJ, I think you said this in our group text last night, is they didn't burn through a lot of arms. I know one of y'all said that for sure. Of course, Cody Howard, 3.1 innings pitched, only allowed one hit, had 3 strikeouts, so that was big for him to come in that role. But they still have a full stable of arms going into the next 2 days. Of course, we'll see Luke Harrison tonight. And then depending on what happens today, I'm told, that Saturday starter for this series, which would normally be your Sunday starter, is up in the air, so we'll see what happens. But if there was one bright spot, that is it for sure.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty pumped for Cody Howard. He was a guy last year that the staff expected a lot out of. He was a Baylor transfer, actually followed Steve Rodriguez from Baylor to Texas. And, they expected a lot of him and it just didn't click. They knew he had talent, but for whatever reason, it didn't click. It really feels like guys that Max Weiner's taking Cody Howard. And, as little as we've seen him this year, it really seems like they are really torn him down and they are starting from the ground up and trying to build him up with good habits. And you see a more confident guy. Like I said, we've seen him in a very limited role, but last night for better or worse, it was one of those games when it gets to that point, right? Hey, it doesn't matter if you go shut out from here on out or you get rocked. We need you to eat innings. And he did that, and they were effective innings, shutting out Arkansas the rest of the way. So pumped for him. You even got Bryce Navarre in there, just getting the freshman some confidence on the road in a big-time environment. So not a ton of positives from that first game, but those two were definitely good to see. And, yeah, you didn't use Grubbs. You didn't use Volantis. You didn't use Burns. So the fact that you've got those 3 guys at this point in the year, as much as you can be fresh, they're fresh for those last 2 games.
Yes, for sure. And we got to see Jonah Williams come back as well. So, obviously that was good news. And then we've had a lot of people ask about Max Ballou and Jeff. I know Sloth, I think he put out a timeline this week where he said, probably still a few weeks away, but hey, at this point, this late in the season, you take all the good news you can get for sure.
Yeah, I wonder, we'll get through the Florida series, I think, and then figure it out because Schloss's initial target date was the OU series. Like they had circled that as, okay, that's a realistic time for him to come back.
Yeah.
I think at that point, a lot of it could depend on where you're at in the conference race, where you are in terms of your positioning for a top 8. I think probably ideally, Blake, if they can, knowing that Schloss likes to play the long game with injuries, I think if they can, they would probably prefer to not use him until the SEC tournament. But hopefully, if they need to, let's say go to Norman and take 2 of 3 to win a conference championship, maybe they can use him. But I'm telling you, and I don't say this, saying that it doesn't matter, like they don't care about it. They would love to win the SEC title. But for Jim Schlossnagle and this entire staff, everything they do is going to be about what's going to benefit us the most and help us the most, give us the best chance when we get to Omaha, if and when they get to Omaha. So, if Blue's back for the OU series, great. If it's not, I honestly, guys, I don't even think, Blake, if they can get through the SEC tournament without Blue, if they can just hold him back and then bring him back for a regional, they might be willing to do that. So I think it's going to be all about where's Max on top of where are they at in terms of the SEC race and the race for a top 8.
And guys, we don't have a much regular season left anyway. You get through the Arkansas series, you have Lamar, and then as you can see, as we put up here on the screen, Florida will be the next one, and then no midweek game between Florida and Oklahoma, and you go right into Norman, and then just a few days after that, guys, you're down in Hoover for the SEC tournament. And then, who knows what happens from there postseason wise. We'll get into that here in just a minute, but I mean, I don't know if it's because, it's just been such a fun season for Texas fans or what. It's just seemed like this season has flown by. And I'm sure if you ask the coaching staff, they'd say the exact opposite. But to me, anyway, it seems like, just the other day we were facing, getting excited talking about facing off against Louisville in that opener.
Yeah, no kidding. What a run it's been since that game, right? And to be ranked number 1, of course, you kind of get smacked around in Fayetteville last night. Let's not sugarcoat that, but there's an opportunity to come back to win the series, to finish strong, to go back to the final 2 series of SEC play with a chance to clinch, right? And that's the position you wanted to be in, right, Jeff? We talked about at the beginning of the year, what would indicate a successful season in year 1 of the SEC? Well, we all kind of sided on being in a position to host a regional. Now, if you're able to host a super, that's even better. And if you're able to make it to Omaha, hey, there you go. But year 1 for Schloss, I think it's exceeded expectations thus far. Of course, nothing matters up until May 2nd as we're recording this in terms of season successful or not until you see what they do in the postseason. But all in all, I would have to say it's been a fun year. Absolutely. Now, can they kick it into overdrive when you're facing adversity, right? Another arm lost, another big piece of this team now sidelined for a little bit. How can they continue to chip away at games, find ways to win 1-run games? We'll see. But right now, I love the makeup of this team.
I'll say if you can get to 500 in the SEC, you had a really good year. This team, even if they lose every game they have left in conference play, they'll finish above 500. Not that we don't want that, but the fact that you're guaranteed to finish above 500, it's been a really good year. And hey, even though it's not to your advantage at this point, props to Schloss for the midweek schedule, because I don't know if anybody noticed, but that game against UTRGV, that's a top 40 RPI team that you got a run roll win over. Lamar, as we sit here right now recording this, they're in the top 60 and are actually top 70 in RPI. They're 66 in the RPI right now. So these are actually pretty competitive games. I think in the grand scheme of things, hopefully they end up helping you. I love the fact too that when you look at the schedule, they'll come back from Fayetteville. You get a couple of days, and then you've got a midweek against Lamar, and then you face Florida. As we said, a really talented Florida team that they're one that, if they can get it figured out, they're going to be dangerous. But then you got no midweek before you go play Oklahoma. That is huge to give yourself that midweek game off. And I think that does a couple things. If you can end up getting, hopefully, if you get the double bye in the SEC tournament, that's really going to let you set up your pitching staff for the postseason. So you're going to be up against it for the next week or so. But once you get through that Florida series, depending on where you're sitting, you could really be in a nice position to set yourself up pitching-wise for the postseason.
Yeah, and Florida, by the way, looked impressive last weekend. They may be finding their footing just at the right time. We'll see.
Hopefully not, Blake. Hopefully it's hopefully it's fool's gold.
Yes, definitely.
I've said this before, man. Kevin O'Sullivan's got the kind of teams at Florida. Typically when you expect a lot of them, like you do this year, what the heck is wrong with Florida? And we think, well, maybe Sully's gonna have it down here. He lost some guys. It's like, oh, dude, they're in the Final Four in Omaha. Oh, congratulations to Florida. So yeah, really, really talented team. And then, hey, that last game of the year, Skip Johnson's got a team that's a top 15 team in the country right now. So it's no easy weekends in the SEC. Even though, folks in College Station might tell you different, but I digress.
Well, before we get to our last segment, I'm going to tell everyone about Tackle Addict. And if you're an avid fisherman who's always searching for the right supplies, then do yourself a favor. Check out tackleaddict.com. It's owned and operated by former Longhorn Brian Robinson and former Longhorn baseball great Brandon Belt. Tackle Addict has everything you need for the best in today's fishing equipment. And they're for the everyday fishermen and serious pros alike. Get their product shipped directly to you from the shores of Lake Sam Rayburn. That's Tackle Addict, ADDICT.com. And Brian and Brandon say hook 'em.
You think Brandon's got any eligibility left? Like maybe Schloss, he's still got that arm on him. Maybe Schloss could get a couple of relief appearances out of him.
Hey, that wouldn't be too shabby. That would be great. I don't think the NCAA would approve, but that would be great.
His bat in the lineup wouldn't hurt right now either.
No,
it would not.
Well, one thing we haven't done in a while, guys, is look at the field projections. D1 baseball has Texas as a number 1 seed. But, we talked about storylines with the A&M game. If this projection ranked true, you would have some storylines there. They got TCU as the second seed in the Austin Regional, and then UTRGV 3, Oral Roberts 4. But, they obviously update this every week, and this is a big change from last time we looked at it, because I think at the time Texas was 8 or 9. So just kind of curious to get y'all's thoughts on this.
I mean, I'm just envisioning any and all possibilities of a Texas A&M super somewhere, and I don't know if I'd be excited or distraught. But hey, point being, I think this sets up favorably for the regional in Austin. If this were to be the case, you look at TCU 14-7 in the Big 12. Texas already is familiar with UTRGV, and hey, I like this lineup, and I like these arms against an Oral Roberts. Right, you could keep that same Ruger Riojas, starting the weekend lineup or rotation, and then feeding into a Luke Harrison. I like it. I think that's, of course, preferable in the round of, or the regional round, but that would be a hellacious super. Is all I'm thinking is Texas and Texas A&M meeting up again.
How about the Southland getting multiple teams into D1's latest projection, and then McNeese is on their list of first 4 out. So when we talk about Lamar coming in, RGV's a top 40 RPI. That Southland's no joke, man. That's a really good baseball league. I know I give my props to the Sun Belt, but I'll give the tip of the cap to the Southland for bringing it strong. Now you figure if Texas is the one, guys, I figured one of TCU, DBU, or UTSA, depending on how things shake out, one of those teams will probably end up being the 2 seed in Austin, and then maybe you get a Southland team, and unfortunately you'll get you're somebody from a 1 bid league that's kind of just happy to be there will be your 4 as is such when you're a top 8. But no, I think between like I said, those Texas schools that are bound for the tournament, and then somebody from the Southland, should be a pretty good competitive regional based on the projection we're looking at it. Now, as far as the super goes, yeah, I could definitely, UCLA's got a really good team, but I could definitely, if this was actually what we're looking at, I could definitely see A&M coming out of that and Los Angeles Super Regional hosted by UCLA. The Aggies, by the way, for D1 baseball guys, they're, even after getting swept by Texas, they are among the last 4 in. A&M and RGV are among the last 4 in. So, yeah, Mississippi State also, if you want to talk about the SEC, they're among D1's first 4 out. So a lot of SEC representation. Everybody pretty much except Missouri. Yeah. Looking at some way, shape, or form, looking to get into the postseason.
Looking back at those projections, Blake, Florida, a 3 seed in the Tallahassee Regional. Gives you an idea of where they sit right now. And do we have an update on Missouri? Have they won a game yet?
I don't believe so.
All right, the trek continues.
0-21, but I keep pointing, especially in light of Chris Lamonis getting fired. They do play Mississippi State, and that series is in Columbia.
And they just fired their coach.
I'd like to think if they're going to get a win, it's going to be there. But again, just shows you life in the SEC. Mississippi State, even though Chris Lamonis is now on the unemployment line, they're still alive to get into the NCAA tournament. So they may be, hell-bent for leather going into Columbia. So it's a pretty forgettable year for the local hardballers in Columbia, Missouri.
Yeah, and talking about A&M being on that last 4, of course, they have LSU this weekend, and then Missouri in there in between, and then they end the SEC play with Georgia. So they got 2 out of 3 pretty tough series. So we'll have to see what happens there. And one thing, when I was looking through those projections, guys, there's a lot of really tough regionals. And I said this a couple weeks ago, there's not a lot of great teams, but there's a ton of really good teams this year, it seems like. And so it wouldn't surprise me if, obviously anything can change between now and then. Those regional predictions will change, but I would imagine there's going to be quite a few upsets as we get into postseason play.
Yeah, it should be fun.
I just wonder, or we're still at the point where I guess a West Coast team has to get a top 8, to kind of balance things out. So I mean, I guess it's UC Irvine and UCLA fighting it out for the token West Coast top 8 at this point. Even though, I mean, you look at it, you can't tell me that, I mean, Auburn or Georgia, one of those teams can't play their way into somebody like that couldn't play their way into the top 8. I mean, Oregon State playing the outlaw schedule. I mean, maybe they can get themselves in there. I don't know.
Yeah, and they predict Oregon State with a pretty tough one. You got Oregon State, Oregon, and then Kansas State, and then Sacramento State as their prediction for that one. So we'll see what happens.
My goal, Blake, with anytime I bring up Oregon State is to get the term outlaw schedule into everyone's vernacular again. We used to talk about that with high school football teams, like a new varsity team. Oh, they don't play varsity until next year. They got to play an outlaw schedule. Well, we don't say that anymore. But let's bring back outlaw scheduling as a term we use freely.
Oh man! All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for today's episode of Bases Loaded. Of course, we want to thank Tackle Addict and Chinook Seedery, and thank you all for tuning in. We'll be back same time, same place next week. So for CJ Vogel and Jeff Howe, I'm Blake Munroe, and we'll see you then.
Welcome.